The dark stain of Teutoburg had left quite the mark on the military record of Rome. Remembered today as a great disaster, at the time its sting was even more acutely felt. However, as we have seen in this series, there was almost no lengths to which the Empire would not go to seek vengeance. But it wasn't just a matter of getting even. In the eyes of Rome, the scales of justice could only be balanced with a pile of Germanic corpses so large that it would eclipse that of the sons of Mars. Thus, for 7 years, the blood feud across the Rhine was waged with unrelenting fury. Battles were won, villages were burned, and eagles were recovered. Yet barbarian steel and northern storms proved a formidable foe, exacting a heavy toll of attrition on the Romans. Thus, when the back of the Germanic resistance was broken following the Battle of the Angrivarian Wall, the Emperor deigned that the war machine had been sated. A line was now drawn in the sand by the imperial throne, separating both Arminius and Germanicus, who otherwise would have eagerly dueled until the end of time. Today, let us conclude our series by examining each of their eventual fates. In this series, our attention has been focused on the Varian saga that played out across the Rhine at the start of the 1st century AD. However, this area has many more stories to tell, which you can explore through our sponsor Wondrium. They've actually been one of our longest backers under the previous name The Great Courses Plus. This recent rebranding comes with a massive expansion of their previous content to include even more educational videos. For those who don't know, Wondrium offers subscription-based on-demand videos covering a huge range of subjects from history to science, travel, art, hobbies, and more. These come delivered in a variety of packages, from your more academic courses to well-produced documentaries, exclusives, and more. Their platform has long been my go-to source for background research while making my own documentaries, and I've learned a ton. Of the many series I love, A History of Eastern Europe has to be one of my favorites. Episode 2, for instance, explores how the migrations of people like the Germanic tribes, the Slavs, and the Mongols have shaped the region. It's the type of content which often gets overlooked, but my mind was blown by how many fingerprints of this past can still be seen today. It was truly elucidating. Right now, Wondrium is offering a free trial, which you can start by clicking the link in the description below or visiting wondrium.com/invicta. I highly recommend that you take a look at what they have to offer and dive into the material that you are most interested in. Let us begin with the final chapter of Arminius. His career is quite well documented for a Romano-German chieftain, which is a great testament to the scale of his accomplishments. Unfortunately, however, this primarily revolves around his dealings with Rome. Once war abated, ancient authors seemingly lost interest with his life, and we have few records of what happened after the withdrawal of the legions. Nonetheless, we shall endeavor to piece together a story. It seems that following the defeat at the Angrivarian Wall, a wounded Arminius and his closest companions pulled back to the northeast. They were probably unsure of just how dedicated the pursuit would be, and therefore focused on putting as much distance between themselves and the legions as possible. This likely meant finding refuge in the eastern lands of the Carusi along the river Elba. Here, the ever diplomatic-minded Arminius would have opened communications to gauge the situation in Germania and find new potential allies. These would have to come from the east, as few tribes of the west would entertain such talks, with legions still lurking in their backyards. However, when the Roman fleet was savaged by a storm on its return journey, we can speculate that Arminius once again attempted to capitalize on this opportunity by riling up anti-Roman sentiment across the lands. Yet what few advances he might have gained were soon wiped out when the Romans rebounded, returning in full force to squash all resistance by the end of the 16 AD campaign season. The following year, however, would see the end of the offensives and a recall of Germanicus. Thus, 17 AD saw diplomats rather than armies cross the Rhine. Now, the Roman policy was to treat these clans as client kingdoms, maintaining the frontier with a mix of carrots and sticks meant to play the tribes off one another. In this reframed geopolitical world, the various Germanic chiefs had much to consider. One of the major positions they wrestled with was just how closely they should embrace Rome. Arminius naturally found himself establishing a base of power as the faction which championed Germanic freedoms, forever swearing to oppose the hated Romans. While this was still an appealing message in theory, the reality of nearly a decade of war meant that many were jaded by this approach. Therefore, power in the region began to consolidate around other chiefs with a more friendly disposition towards Rome. One of the greatest rivals to Arminius was Maroboduus, king of the Marcomanni. His tribe had a formidable reputation as great warriors who clashed with Roman armies in the past. This respect was evident in 9 AD when Arminius had actually sent the head of Varus to Maroboduus, hoping to gain his alliance. However, in the war that followed, the Marcomanni king had remained neutral, which now allowed him to play the peacemaker. He could even boast of never having been defeated by the legions, in contrast to the battered Arminius who had accumulated a fair share of losses in recent years. This rivalry apparently escalated to such a degree that the two chieftains came to blows. Normally, such intertribal spats would have involved a series of raids and skirmishes to sort out who was top dog. However, owing to the severity of their animosity, and perhaps the degree to which the recent years had militarized the Germanic peoples, this war quickly escalated into a major conflict, the two sides apparently meeting in a climactic pitched battle. Unfortunately, details are frustratingly scarce, with our main source Tacitus depicting the battle in more symbolic terms as a clash of ideals. Arminius was the freedom fighter, striving for a united German people and trying to excise the cancer of Roman sycophants. Maroboduus, on the other hand, touted his great strength and his ability to coexist with Rome. While Arminius fought for ancient glories and freedom, Maroboduus fought to increase the size and influence of his own kingdom. As for the fighting itself, Tacitus mentions only that it was hard fought. We have no other sources or archaeological findings to go on, and so must imagine a battle fought in the traditional Germanic fashion. Perhaps, though, Arminius may have borrowed a trick or two from his time spent fighting with and against the Romans. Whatever the source of advantage, it ultimately made him the victor of the field. In the aftermath, Maroboduus was forced to retreat into the hilly forests of Bohemia. Here, he would prove just as elusive as Arminius had been to the Romans in the years prior, and managed to outlast his pursuer. The following year, though, Maroboduus would be challenged by a younger nobleman and forced into exile. He would then flee to Rome, and eventually be held in captive in Ravenna. Arminius meanwhile returned to his own tribe. Here, he continued to plot a way to unite the disparate tribes. Yet after 4 long years of frustrating negotiations, he was getting nowhere. The prediction of Emperor Tiberius proved prescient. Left to their own devices, the tribes would fall prey to their own petty squabbles. This was of course facilitated by the favors and gold which passed over the Rhine to ensure that no single chieftain grew too powerful. Eventually, this yielded an opportunity for Rome to finally rid themselves of Arminius without having to expend a single drop of blood. A chieftain of the Conti had sent a letter to Tiberius, apparently offering to kill the most wanted man in the empire if poison were sent. The letter was read aloud in the Senate, and according to Tacitus, quote, the reply was that it was not by secret treachery, but openly and by arms that the people of Rome avenged themselves of their enemies. A noble answer, by which Tiberius sought to liken himself to the generals of old who had forbidden and even denounced the poisoning of King Pyrrhus. At least that's how the story gets reported. In reality, it's hard to know just how much truth there was to this deliberate grandstanding. Who knows just what schemes were being wrought by the spy masters of Rome? Perhaps it was they who played a hand in the eventual conspiracy which led members of the Carusi tribe to murder Arminius in 21 AD. Unfortunately, we shall never know. Yet either way, the demise of the war leader caused many across the lands to weep at his loss. It seems that even the Romans grudgingly recognized the magnitude of the man who had passed. Tacitus leaves the following eulogy, quote, assuredly he was the deliverer of Germany, one too who had defied Rome not in her early rise as other kings and generals, but in the height of her empire's glory, had fought indecisive battles, yet in war remained unconquered. He completed 37 years of life, 12 years of power, and even now he remains a theme of songs among barbarous nations. Germanicus, meanwhile, was also the subject of much praise among his people. In true Roman fashion, this would take the form of the ultimate honor, a triumph. Such celebrations had been quite common during the Republic, representing the pinnacle of success for any general. However, in the era of Augustus, full triumphs had become a rarity, as the emperor was wary of allowing any potential rivals to shine too brightly. Yet they still had their place in the realm of imperial propaganda. The grant by Tiberius of a full triumph for Germanicus, for example, was a clear signal to all that the returning general was to be recognized as the successor to the throne. In addition, the hosting of a triumph was an excellent way to boost public support of the regime. Everyone loved a good parade, especially those that made them feel like masters of the world, and which were followed by days of feasting. This one in particular was an event that none would miss, as it was a chance for all to partake in the Avenging of Varus. Thus, on May 26, 17 AD, Germanicus kicked off his triumph to raucous applause. In true superstar fashion, he rode in on a two-wheeled chariot pulled by 4 horses, splendidly adorned in purple and gold, his face painted red. A laurel crown was held above his head by a slave, who would gently murmur in his ear as the procession continued, reminding him that he was still mortal. Behind the general was his wife and 5 children, in a chariot of their own. They too received great cheers, as word spread of how she had been the perfect mother, not just of the family, but of the legions in Germania. Behind these marched the legions who had fought through the forests and swamps of Germania. 50,000 veterans in their polished armor, playing rousing marching songs and loudly belting ribald songs at their general's expense. Behind them would be the mountains of loot that had been stolen from the German people, prisoners of war, and floats that gave visual representations to the battles that had been won. This train included captives from every German tribe. Conspicuous among them was Thusnelda, the wife of Arminius, and their young son, who had served as a stand-in for the yet uncaptured Germanic chieftain. This procession wound its way through the streets of Rome, ultimately ending at the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, where Germanicus would ceremonially sacrifice a white cow to the god, symbolically beginning a festival that would last for days. When these celebrations had finally abated, it was time for the hero of Rome's next assignment. Having mastered the northern border, he would now be sent east. In recent years, this area had been of increasing importance to the empire, owing to its great wealth and resource production. However, since the Civil War, it had fallen into disarray. It would now be up to Germanicus to bring order to the provinces and kingdoms of the region. Once again, this was a clear sign meant to reinforce his status as the right hand of the emperor and heir apparent. This was formally communicated by granting Germanicus Imperius Maius, literally the greatest power, to do as he saw fit. On the way to his new post, Germanicus would make the most of the transit voyage. He first stopped in Greece, visiting the famed cities of philosophers and mythical heroes. One of these stops was Nicopolis, a name which might not necessarily be recognizable to modern ears. To the Romans, though, Nicopolis was the best sort of tourist town. The city, whose name literally means victory town, was dedicated to Augustus's victory at Actium. It included several parks and museums dedicated to the battle, with various monuments, statues, and memorabilia. They even had a display of the types of ships that had been at the battle, which were maintained at anchor and ranged from the smallest monoremes to the hulking decaremes. Games and celebrations known as the Actian Games were held there annually. Germanicus even visited the actual site of the battle, a true treat for any commander such as himself. From there, he then went to Olympia and joined the Olympic competition for 17 AD. Amazingly, Tacitus doesn't discuss this bit, but some inscriptions survive, including this one from a statue base. It reads as follows, quote, Germanicus Caesar, son of Imperator Tiberius Caesar Augustus, victorious in the Olympic Games with his chariot drawn by 4 fully grown horses. This monument to him was erected by Marcus Antonius Paesanus, for his own patron, Germanicus, to Olympian Zeus. From Olympia, he continued on to Athens, another tourist city that flaunted its architecture, art, and elite schools of oratory and philosophy. Next, he set off across the Aegean to tour the Ionian coast. His ship stopped at several famous cities, such as Halicarnassus and the legendary city of Ilium, better known as Troy. The expedition next ventured into the Black Sea before making a return to Greece. Here, Germanicus apparently consulted the oracle of Apollo at Claros, hoping to catch a glimpse of what the future might hold. According to legend, the prophecy he received contained dark tidings of impending doom. Likely, this would have been remedied by the appropriate sacrifices and offerings to Apollo. Thus sated, Germanicus then continued south across the Aegean and into the Mediterranean, stopping by the island of Rhodes. It was also another great tourist site, with the ruins of the famed Colossus still visible in the harbor. But this stop was also a great attraction to military commanders. The city itself had seen its fair share of sieges, and its navy held a reputation as one of the most formidable forces in the ancient world. Surely, these sailors would have marveled at the stories of Rome's 1,000-ship armada that had sailed to invade Germania, though perhaps that last part about the storms was left off from the story. From there, Germanicus made his way to Armenia, involving himself in dynastic politics and organizing the province of Cappadocia. In these matters, he handled things with a noticeably lighter touch than had been the case with the tribes of the north, favoring diplomacy over force of arms. His intrusion was looked upon with some annoyance by the Roman political appointees of the region who had benefited from the previous status quo. Among the masses, though, Germanicus was like a touring rock star. People apparently turned out in droves to embrace him wherever he went. His bodyguard supposedly even voiced concerns about the security implications of this sort of exposure. But brushing these concerns aside, Germanicus continued with his tour, wintering in the lands of Syria. After ensuring the stability in Roman Asia, and even meeting with the king of Parthia, he made his way to Egypt, another land of legends. Here, he took a full tour from the legendary tomb of Alexander and the wonders of Alexandria to the pyramids themselves. He gazed upon the creation of the pharaohs, the monuments and the temples of the ancient civilization, and the Nile River that was mother of them all. Amazingly, we can catch a small glimpse of what this visit was like from a fragmentary scrap of papyrus that records one of the speeches he gave to gathered crowds. The interjections of the people are even recorded as well, and the excitement is palpable. This speaks to the propaganda power of this whole tour of the East. Unlike the more reserved Tiberius, Germanicus was a young, charismatic war hero who could clearly work a crowd. This was helped by the fact that many in the East had long paid homage to god-kings, and a visiting member of the imperial family was the closest thing they would get to meeting a deity. It also helped that Germanicus and his entourage acted as a miniature Roman government, granting petitions, answering prayers, and showering communities in money. Yet everything was not all sunshine and rainbows. When Germanicus returned to Syria that summer, he found that the Roman administrator Piso had either ignored or outright revoked the orders of the imperial heir. The two had not been getting along lately, and this was the final straw. Germanicus now ordered that the man be recalled back to Rome. Piso seemed to comply, and made his way to the port of Seleucia by the sea. Shortly thereafter, however, Germanicus fell ill. Tacitus recounts the following, quote, "The terrible intensity of the malady was increased by the belief that he had been poisoned by Piso, and certainly there were found hidden in the floor and in the walls disinterred remains of human bodies, incantations and spells, and the name of Germanicus inscribed on leaden tablets, half-burnt cinders smeared with blood, and other horrors by which, in popular belief, souls are devoted to the infernal deities. Piso, too, was accused of sending emissaries to note curiously every unfavorable symptom of the illness." On the 10th of October, 19 AD, a 34-year-old Germanicus would succumb to his affliction, just 2 years prior to when Arminius would ultimately perish as well. The sudden nature and odd circumstances of his demise sent the rumor mill into overdrive. Piso had cursed him with black magic. No, it was with poison that he did it. Well, I heard the Imperial Guard was to blame. Please, friend, who else but the jealous emperor could have ordered such a thing? From our modern perspective, it seems plausible that he was merely the casualty of one of the many illnesses that routinely culled the population at the time. Alas, the true cause shall never be known. News of Germanicus' death quickly made its way back to Rome. Apparently, the people immediately went into mourning. Somber days followed, filled with funeral processions, eulogies, and the awarding of all manner of posthumous honors. This was a tragic loss for the empire. He left behind a legacy of glory, which has echoed throughout the chapters of history to this very video. But perhaps one of the greatest legacies left behind by Germanicus would be that of his son, a young boy named Gaius who had grown up in the army camps of Germania. Nicknamed affectionately by the troops as Caligula, he would one day succeed Tiberius as the third emperor of Rome. But the future of his tale and that of Germania shall have to wait for another video. We hope you've appreciated this deep dive into the Avenging Varus saga. It's an incredible tale of heroics and grit from one of the great bloody conflicts of antiquity that rarely gets covered. I hope it's proved both educational and entertaining. Definitely let us know what other sagas of the past you would like to see us cover next. A huge thanks to the patrons for funding the channel, and to the researchers, writers, and artists for making this episode possible. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content, and check out these other related videos. See you in the next one.